Hey there, my name is Matt and I am located in Yellowstone National Park right now, and behind me you can see the Grand Loop Road. You'll see some cars driving by. This is the main road that goes around the park. One of the most common questions I am asked is about driving in Yellowstone. People who are visiting Yellowstone are really having a hard time understanding the size of it, and they don't really know how to get around and what to expect. And so in this video I want to tell you 10 don'ts, 10 things not to do if you're driving in Yellowstone National Park. So the first don't is a rather obvious one. Don't speed. Okay, so the speed limit throughout the park is 45 miles per hour in most places. Sometimes it's a little less. Now, in a lot of places you can go faster than 45. The roads are straight enough that you could go faster than 45 anyway. So why do you think they have a 45 mile an hour speed limit? For the wildlife. Okay, this is a way of protecting the wildlife, because you will get wildlife that comes and runs out in front of you occasionally. So please be a responsible traveler and go the speed limit 45. Please do not speed. Okay, the second thing is don't worry too much about gasoline. So a lot of people that ask us questions are very worried about running out of gas in Yellowstone National Park. Now you might save a few cents if you fill up outside of the park before you come in, but even if you wait till you're inside the park, there are plenty of gas stations. So there are many gas stations all over. At all the major stops there's gas stations, so you're really never very far away from gas in Yellowstone National Park. Okay, now the third thing is don't expect to have cell coverage here. There's virtually no cell coverage in Yellowstone National Park. So if you do run out of gas, or if you break down and have car problems, you're not going to be able to call anybody for help. So you're going to have to just track down somebody, flag them down on the road, and ask them to help you out. Maybe they can take you to the next stop where you can talk to a mechanic or something like that and get some help, or talk to a ranger. There are rangers that are driving around the park all the time, so you might be able to see one of them anyway. So if you do have problems, you're really not far from help, but you're not going to be able to call for help. The cell coverage is very spotty. Like, there are some spots where you might be able to get a little bit of cell coverage, but my daughter was trying to text me yesterday at Old Faithful and it was just too unreliable. Okay, the fourth thing is don't expect to have beautiful vistas everywhere you drive. Yellowstone is beautiful, but a lot of it is forest. I mean, probably like 90% of the park is actually forest. And so a lot of the time while you're driving around, you're actually just driving through lodgepole pines. Now they do open up into some beautiful vistas occasionally. Obviously there's canyons in Yellowstone. The geyser basins actually provide some of the best vistas, because as you're driving through, you'll get these openings because the trees can't grow where the geysers are. So you'll get these nice openings that you can look around. And then there's the Yellowstone River that you'll be driving along. Well, plenty of different rivers that you'll be driving along in Yellowstone. So don't get me wrong, there's beauty as you're driving, but if you're expecting kind of like everywhere you go to be gorgeous, it's not really like that in the car. You're driving through a lot of lodgepole pines and forests. Okay, the fifth thing is kind of on that same note. Don't forget to notice the small little pine trees as you're driving. So as you're driving on the roads, you'll notice sometimes that there's some very small pine trees, and then there will be signs in front of them that say, reseeded by the wildfires of 1988 or some other wildfires. There's wildfires every year in Yellowstone. The most famous ones were the summer of '88, but there's been many wildfires. That's how these lodgepole pines reproduce. And so it is kind of interesting that you'll see these little baby trees as you drive throughout the park. And just remember, that is a result of forest fires, which kind of clear out the undergrowth and all the debris and stuff like that. And it causes the pine cones that drop from the pine trees to pop open and reseed, and that is nature's way of cleaning up the park. Okay, the sixth thing is don't drive too slow. So I don't want you speeding, but then there's also signs that say, hey, if you're driving too slow, you need to pull off on some of the little pullouts. They'll have pullouts every once in a while. They'll say pull off on the pullouts so that other people can drive through. So you need to remember that it does take a long time to drive around the loops. So you don't want to slow traffic down even more than necessary. So don't drive so slow that you're driving everybody nuts and creating a big chain. Be considerate, get over, let everybody through. Okay, on the same vein here, number 7 is don't expect to get around quickly. So Yellowstone is laid out in a figure 8. We call it the upper loop and the lower loop. This is actually called the Grand Loop Road, but we never really call it that. It's just upper loop and lower loop. And it takes about 2.5 hours to drive around the lower loop if you're just driving. That's not stopping for anything, any attractions or anything like that. It's just driving time to get around the lower loop. Upper loop is just a little bit smaller. It takes about 2 hours to drive around the upper loop. If you look at it on the map, there's kind of main points, stops on each of the loops. There's kind of 4 main points on the upper loop and 6 main points on the lower loop. Of course, since they're merged, 2 of those points are actually the same right where they merge, like Canyon and Norris. Those are the same ones. Okay, my point here is that it takes about 30 minutes. You can count on about 30 minutes to get from point to point. So again, that's 2.5 hours on the lower, about 2 hours on the upper. Now you might get through faster, you might get through slower, but just plan on about 30 minutes from point to point. Okay, the 8th thing is don't expect to avoid traffic jams. So traffic jams come in all shapes and sizes in Yellowstone National Park. The most common is probably bison jams, where bison literally just walk out in the road and stand there. They just stand there and block traffic. It's the funniest thing because they just act completely oblivious. They don't care about you. My mother calls them inconsiderate buffalo. So we call those bison jams. A lot of times the rangers will come and clear out those bison jams. What's up, guys? Oh, poor. Okay, now the next thing that might cause a jam is what we call a bear jam. These were the original traffic jams in Yellowstone because people would actually stop to feed the bears out of their car. I've got a whole story about that in my audio guide for Yellowstone, but people would actually stop and feed the bears from their car. By the way, if you want the audio guide, it's on my website, we'reintherockies.com. Anyway, today we call them bear jams if people are just stopping to look at the bears. Bears rarely, stand in front of the road and block the traffic, but they will be off on the side and people will stop and stare at that bear. I mean, because everybody wants to see a bear that comes to Yellowstone, right? So if they see one, it is going to cause a long delay and a bear jam. Okay, and then the third thing that could likely happen is just simply construction. They're always having to work on these roads. They get a lot of damage because most of the year is winter, and it seems like they're always doing construction on the roads in Yellowstone. So be prepared for some traffic jams of one form or another at Yellowstone. Okay, the 9th thing is don't expect to find parking everywhere. So the parking lots were designed probably back in the 60s would be my guess, is when they last updated most of these parking lots. That's when the National Park System last got a huge influx of money from the government during the 50s and 60s during a program called Mission 66. And you can imagine how many people visited in the 60s versus how many people are visiting in the 2020s, and it is dramatically different. So these parking lots were not designed to handle that many people. And so don't expect to find parking everywhere you go. A lot of them will fill up early in the day and they'll be pretty full throughout maybe 10 to 4, they'll be pretty full. So, if it's full, you just need to move on to the next thing. That's one of the things my guide helps you out with. I have a travel guide for Yellowstone that will help you out and help you be prepared with the plan B in case your plan A falls through. I'll give you the whole thing, which ones to go to early, which ones you can delay. And so check that out if you need a game plan. Okay, and the final thing, number 10, is don't get out of your car and challenge a bison to a fight like some guy did a couple of years ago in an epic, drunken, kind of craziness here. This guy got out of his car and challenged this buffalo to a fight, which almost charged him. And the guy got in all sorts of trouble, and I'm not trying to embarrass the guy. But we have a whole video about dumb Yellowstone behavior because for some reason, Yellowstone just attracts some really crazy behavior out of people. So anyway, I shouldn't need to tell you this, but don't get out of your car and challenge the buffalo to a fight. Okay, and I have one more bonus tip here, which is to check out the article that I wrote about driving in Yellowstone. I told you I got a lot of questions on this, so I created an article about driving in Yellowstone on my website, we'reintherockies.com. I'm going to put it in the description here, a link to it in the description underneath this video. If you don't know how to access it, click on the little read more if you're on a desktop. If you're on a phone, over here, click on the little down arrow and you'll see it'll drop down a bunch of text with some links and stuff like that. I'm gonna put that in there for you as a resource because it'll cover things like cell coverage and gas stations and all that you need to know. So feel free to check that out. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, go west, young traveler.